Hi, everybody. It is good to be together here in Zoom land. I'm glad that we're all together as we begin to talk about what's contemplated for reusing. It's just a portion of the former Hotel Indigo, which we are affectionately calling for now 399 Grove Street. And we're moving forward with a temporary emergency assistant housing for families, more specifically 59 families. And our goal tonight is to try to be responsive to the needs, the questions, the concerns of Newtonians. First, we've got a terrific group with us who can give a brief overview of the plans and the anticipated timeline and logistics. And then really the point of the evening is to answer any questions any of us might have. I've got to look here in Zoom land. I think, Barney, I'm going to ask for your help. Can you tell me which city councilors have joined? I'll keep going a little bit forward, and then after you poke around in.
Sure. I see.
Who do you see?
Councilor Markowitz, Councilor Bowman, Councilor Krinsman, Councilor Gentile.
Great. So we have all three. 399 Grove Street is in what we call Ward 4. And we've got all three of our city councilors from Ward 4. We welcome you as well, Councilor Bowman. And Barney, if you see anybody, we'll keep moving forward and maybe we'll just double check. We've got a whole slew of terrific people here from various city departments who've been in communication with all sorts of people at the nonprofit, at the private company, at the state, and we'll be here to answer questions. That includes Barney Heath. A special thank you to Barney. Barney, along with Hattie Kerwin-Derrick, who's our Director of Community Engagement and Inclusion, are going to help us through the whole Q&A section. Thank you in advance. We have a team from our Health and Human Services Department led by Linda Walsh, our Commissioner. Kathy Smith, our interim school superintendent, has a great team with her who she'll introduce. John Lojek is either here or coming from Inspectional Services. Thank you, Superintendent McMains from our police department. I believe, is our fire chief here? I thought he was coming. Greg Gentile might be here or is on his way in, our chief of our fire department. We also have terrific colleagues from two important state agencies. The Department of Housing and Community Development Undersecretary Jennifer Maddox will introduce her team in a moment. And we've got staff from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, affectionately known as DHCD, who will speak, and a very experienced nonprofit who's going to provide the 24/7 on-site services and the education services, Catholic Charities of Boston, and their team will introduce themselves. Let me just say that we've all been seeing and hearing and reading about the Commonwealth's emergency shelter system being at capacity and facing significantly increased levels of demand by families facing homelessness. We're famous here in Newton for having 13 villages. Well, it's taking quite a few villages that you're seeing represented on this screen in the form of state agencies, a private company, a nonprofit, and city departments to come together to provide additional emergency family housing. And I not only think this is an important responsibility of all of us, but for us here in Newton, I think it's really a privilege to help parents and children at a really difficult time in their lives. And I so look forward to working with our community and all the people on this screen to welcome them and support them. With that, I'm handing off the baton first to Jennifer Maddox. Good to see you, Jennifer, our Undersecretary of Housing and Community Development up at the State House. Jennifer, first off to you.
Oh, good evening. And thank you so much, Mayor Fuller, for hosting this meeting tonight and just being a real partner on this effort, along with your team at the school and planning departments. Thank you to my colleagues at DHCD and our partner, Catholic Charities and Mark Development on this important project. This is a really dynamic partnership we formed here to support families in need. And I am so grateful to live in Massachusetts, where our policy choices mean families are not forced to sleep in cars or tents when they find themselves without a safe place. But the reality is that we have many more housing insecure neighbors than those who enter our shelter system. Thousands of students across our state report living in overcrowded spaces, couch surfing, or other unstable situations. Our housing crisis is not new, but we are seeing the problem rolls downhill. And so we have a record number of families facing homelessness, and it is increasingly hard for families to exit shelter, leading our overall shelter numbers to continue to rise. And right now, our shelter system is in crisis. Unfortunately, some of this is bigger than us. We need Congress to enact immigration reform, but we do have a responsibility to ensure eligible families have immediate access to shelter. Now, January of 2023, we saw a 70% increase in new families entering shelter compared to the year before. 70% increase. We are working closely with our partners across state government to address these families' short and long-term needs and how we can best address this housing crisis. But we also understand that individual cities and towns may not have the resources or specialized services to manage the needs of new families, from educational to public safety concerns. And I want to make it clear that we are doing everything we can at the state level to make this transition as seamless as possible. Here in Newton, we have the next 4 to 5 months to ensure we can welcome families to the former Hotel Indigo, and I'm confident in our teams at the city and state to do that. I'm going to now turn it over to our partners at Catholic Charities, who will be providing services to the families at Hotel Indigo.
Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Larry Mays. I'm the Senior Vice President for Catholic Charities. I direct government relations as well as community relations. I'm here tonight with my colleagues, Beth Chambers, who's a Vice President for Basic Needs, as well as Stephen Fulton, who is our Director of Shelter Services. Catholic Charities is one of the largest providers of social services in Massachusetts. We direct our services to those in need, and we do it with compassion and with respect. Our footprint goes as north as Haverhill. We have operations as far north as Haverhill, as well as far south as Brockton. We are governed, or we govern ourselves, I should say, how we organize ourselves is through 4 core services. Basic needs, which has to do with food pantries of food, or once the more popular term is dealing with the issue of food insecurity, behavioral health, counseling, family and youth services is another core service area, childcare, after school programs, camps, that kind of thing, as well as a service line, adult education and workforce development. We see adult education and workforce development as 2 sides of the same coin. And finally, we have our refugee and immigrant services. Catholic Charities is one of the few federally, federally recognized resettlement agencies in the country. In that line of business, we also provide legal services, interpretive services, and a host of other things that we do there. There's more I could talk about, but we have a lot to cover tonight. So I want to make sure that I turn it over to my colleague, Beth Chambers.
Thanks, Larry. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Our shelters, every night we are providing shelter to 190 men, women, and children in the greater Boston area. And every day we're providing meals, counseling, group work, housing assistance, and anything that we can do to help our families move into their permanent housing within the next few months. We keep our volunteers busy every day with watching the children on the playgrounds and working with them, doing homework and assisting them also with their housing. And the key is that the volunteers in many of our programs are always the backbone of what we do within the community. So our shelters are listed here on the slide. We have 3 family shelters, in 2 of them in the city of Boston, 1 up in Lowell, our emergency shelter for women in Union Square, Somerville, and the treatment program, which is here in Newton at Our Lady Help of Christians Parish campus, where we have 11 women and children as the women are undergoing counseling and treatment for addiction. And so now I'd like to turn it over to Stephen Fulton, our Director of Shelter Services, to talk about this project in Newton and what we would like to do.
Good evening, everybody. The proposed family emergency shelter in Newton will house 59 families, as our mayor has said. The families every day will be provided allergen-aware meals on site. We will also have on site 24/7 security and fully trained shelter staff. For the hotel's common spaces, we are envisioning a computer lab or a homework space, a children's playroom or a play space actually operated by Horizons for Homeless Children, meeting and conference rooms. Based upon the outpouring of offers from the community already, we are anticipating a robust volunteer program and will have a volunteer coordinator on staff. Educational programming that adheres to a rapid rehousing model will be provided for all the families. Each family will participate in case management and activities geared to assist them obtain and sustain permanent housing. These will include financial literacy, parenting skills, employment, and work skills training. So now I'd like to introduce our partners from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Anne Marie Stronach. I am the operational liaison for districts across Massachusetts and representing DESE. And I am here with my colleague, Sarah Slaughterback, who is the DESE State Homeless Coordinator and works directly with schools. I'd like to start out by saying that, first of all, Newton has a long, strong history of supporting students in shelters. And all districts in the Commonwealth have had students who are homeless at some point. In many cases, the student situation may seem largely invisible to the bordering communities. Based on the data that we have from the Department of Community and Housing Development, we expect approximately 1 school-aged child per family in this shelter. Many of these families who enter the shelters might have a school-aged children who are enrolled in a district outside of Newton. The school in the other district is referred to as the Student School of Origin. Under the McKinney-Vento law, students have the right to stay enrolled in their school of origin. Therefore, not all of the school-aged children in the shelter will necessarily be enrolled in Newton Public Schools. It is our job at DESE to work very, very closely with the state agencies and the provider and the school district to make sure that our students are enrolled in school and transported to their school of origin as soon as possible. It is always in the forefront of our minds when we're working with our homeless students, that we understand that student privacy, including their living arrangements, are protected by federal laws. And keep in mind that the students and the families who live in these shelters in hotels are going through very difficult times in their lives. So when we're dealing with these students, we take very care to make sure that they are felt welcome. And I know that Newton has done that over the years. So I want to thank the residents of Newton and the local officials who do that every single day. I would like to talk to you about some opportunities for additional funding to support this shelter in your schools. The governor was very signed in on March 29th, the supplemental budget, which will help Hotel Indigo. This supplemental budget will reimburse the host district, like Newton, more quickly for costs associated with educating their children in the new shelters. Otherwise, Newton would have had to wait much longer for the funding for these students to be incorporated in their state educational aid. As always, districts are reimbursed for transportation through the McKinney-Vento Homeless Student Transportation, and we are grateful again for the governor's commitment, and she has proposed a significant increase in the funding of this line item in her host budget, in her House 1 budget, I'm sorry. And then lastly, there is also an emergency support grant, which DHCD has provided for students placed in these shelters, again, like Hotel Indigo, which provides $1,000 per student for immediate needs, such as laptops, school supplies, tutoring, and other supports identified as the district. We are committed at DHCD to support the Department of Housing and Community Development as they coordinate with districts on family placements, and obviously work with our partners at the school every single day. And we look forward to answering any questions that you may have for us. And with that, I will turn it back.
I think we're turning it over to Superintendent Kathy Smith and her team.
My apologies,
Newton
yes.
Public Schools, no problem.
Thank you, Mayor Fuller. And I'd like to introduce my staff from the Newton Public Schools. This evening, I have with me my assistant superintendents. Aisha Farag, our assistant superintendent for elementary education. Toby Roma, our assistant superintendent for secondary education. And Casey No Miller, our assistant superintendent for student services in the Newton Public Schools. And I want to say, I am pleased to be here this evening to talk about certainly the wraparound and the support that we are prepared to provide for our schools, our families, and most importantly, those students that will cross our doors. We immediately put together our team, I want to say in late February, when the mayor notified us of this possibility. We continue to discuss and prepare ways that we will provide, as we always do, a welcoming, inclusive, academic environment, and we will be able to, again, meet the needs of all of the students that come to the Newton Public Schools. I am so pleased to see some of my partners that I have worked with. Having been in education, I always say this to everybody, 45 years. I've had the opportunity to work with Catholic Charities, certainly my partners at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, who are always there to answer questions, provide guidance and support. I want to thank Commissioner Riley, and we will work collaboratively to make sure that this is as seamless a process as possible. And we look forward to any questions you may have this evening. Thank you, Mayor, and I'm going to hand it back to you.
And right over to Barney and Hattie, who will explain how you can ask questions and how we'll manage the whole thing. And I did see in a Q&A, we have, let me give you the exact number. We have 78 attendees plus our panelists tonight, so people can get a sense of how big the universe is out there Barney and Hattie, over to you.
Hattie, you've done a few of these, so I'll defer to you to start. I'm happy to help moderate and direct questions.
Okay, so I think most people by now might know how to use Zoom, but just as a refresher, you do at the bottom have a raise hand feature. So if you have questions, raise your hand. We will promote you. You can ask your question, and then we'll put you back in the as an attendee. While we're doing live questions, we will also, if you have another question, we will answer those that are in the Q&A.
And I'm happy to start with a couple of those right off the bat, if that makes sense, Hattie.
Yep.
Okay, so the first series of questions are from Mr. Friedberg, who is asking about the Dover Amendment and how can this use be considered a religious or educational activity. And he asked whether the city has issued a ruling. So I'm going to answer this in two ways. One, I think it's probably fair to speak to Catholic Charities to talk about the educational activities that they're planning in concert with the housing, since that will form the basis for the Dover Amendment. The second piece that I can speak to is how we handle things in the city, which is when we get an application, which we haven't received yet, we look to see if it qualifies under the Dover Amendment. In most cases, when we're looking at something like this, we're looking at not just the use, and I'll speak to that in a second, but the building and the parking and setbacks and things of that nature. That really doesn't apply with respect to this building because it already exists. It really is a question of the use. The parking is always a big issue, and that's one of the areas that we do look very closely at with respect to even Dover protected uses. But in this case, it's really about the use. From what we understand, and again, we haven't seen a formal application. I don't know if Attorney Bookbinder wants to speak to this. It certainly would appear that the educational uses that accompany the housing here make it a Dover protected use. We've been supplied with previous instances and cases of this, so we're fairly confident that it meets that minimum test.
May I jump in just for one sec and take one step back? I think some people may not know what the Dover Amendment is and kind of what anything we're talking about. This used to be a hotel. Now it's going to be used as a temporary emergency shelter. How does that intersect with Newton's zoning? Because we have zoning all across the city that says what can operate where. And Barney, if you can take one step back.
I can. Thank you, Mayor.
What the Dover Amendment is, and then we can go over to Catholic Charities.
Yeah, and I can cite a couple of local examples. I also can just take a piece of the state law that was enacted in, it actually goes back to 1950. But we have local examples, obviously educational institutions such as LaSalle and Ward 4 and Boston College. We have other nonprofits in the city as well, but the segment of the Dover Amendment that would apply has to do with, and I'm just going to paraphrase, no zoning ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit, regulate, or restrict the use of land for educational purposes on land owned or leased by a nonprofit educational corporation, provided, and here's the part I was talking about before, that such land or structures may be subject to reasonable regulations concerning the bulk and height of structures, determining yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, parking, and building coverage requirements, which is what I alluded to earlier. So that's the basis. So I don't know if Attorney Bookbinder wants to speak to the Dover Amendment in this case as well.
Sure, Barney, happy to say a few words. There have been a series of cases from the higher courts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which have found that uses such as this, and particularly shelters for homeless families, do qualify for Dover treatment. And the linchpin to this is really the educational programming. And I know that Stephen Fulton can speak to this if he wants to add a few things, but the primary goal here is not simply to put a roof over the people's heads, but it's to help people get the skills they need so they can move from the temporary housing into permanent housing and also maintain the permanent housing. So the educational aspect is really the fulcrum of the program. And again, there are cases that have so held within the Commonwealth. Steve, do you want to say a few words about the educational piece?
I think you've mentioned it pretty well Stephen. I'm in contact with a couple of the other shelters that have opened up similar to this to just ensure that we have the same robust educational programming that is both required and what we want to provide for the families. It seems to fall in line with what we're doing, practices we're doing now, and will continue.
So one thing I want to add is the Ward 4 counselors have asked that when we do actually get the formal building permit application, we hold a community meeting, which is typically what we do in the case of a Dover protected use, coordinated through the ward counselors. We will do that in short order once we get an application. So we'll hold a separate meeting in addition to tonight.
Thank you, Barney. We do have a hand raised. I'm going to allow Ted Chapman to speak. Go ahead, Ted.
Just a reminder, Hattie, are we suggesting that everybody confine
Yes,
themselves
great.
to 3 minutes?
Yep.
You might
If you
remind
could-
or tell folks.
Yep, if you could leave your questions to 3 minutes so
Yep.
we can allow everyone to ask.
I did put my question in the chat. But the question is that, the Indigo grounds do not provide any outdoor space for recreation or play. There are playgrounds in Auburndale at the Williams School and at the Hamilton Center in Lower Falls, as well as recreational trails along the Charles that are quite nearby. Will there be transportation and supervision provided for the children or other people in the housing at these venues, for these venues? And second is how can local neighbors, residents of Lower Falls and Auburndale, get involved to help in volunteering?
Seems like one that should go to Catholic Charities.
Sorry, this is Kevin McKenzie. And I would say, first, thank you for the question very much. Appreciate it. I think it's a little early on in the process right now in terms of ultimately what the plans are going to be as we work through how to respond to each of the families and the needs there. So I think we'll take that into consideration and work with everybody here in terms of our partners and sort through the best way to approach that.
Great,
Perhaps
thank you.
somebody from the team, though, can weigh in how we'll be working with Newtonians who would like to give time or goods or be of help and be partners, if somebody could speak to that.
Sure. I think we will, after the meeting this evening, I think we'll get something up on the site and allow people to, one, either volunteer their time or donate to the cause or several other ways that, we can have people get involved and help support the initiative that we intend to undertake here. So I think as a follow-up, we will have something on our site to kind of manage and oversee the opportunities to volunteer and help and get involved.
And we will also
we'll link it on the Newton site as well. We'll make sure we've got here. Sorry, Beth, to step on.
That's great. And we'll also make sure that at the end, there'll be a special email address for those who want to volunteer to help out. And it's through these volunteers, as I said before, that volunteers are the backbone of a lot of what we do. So I look forward to working with the community more and coming up with these activities outside and you know, in the area and everything for the kids, for the adults, etc. We will have lots of programs and lots of volunteers to help out.
And I do have to say, Mayor, I've been really blessed at this point. I've already been able to meet with 3 or 4 of your local agencies, resources. Everybody, there's a wonderful outpouring, and it's just going to continue. So we'll monitor that that email address and then reach out as it is appropriate.
Great. We have another person, Sarah Levy.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Levy, and I first want to thank Mayor Fuller and her team and all of you for your leadership in not only creating but welcoming a shelter in this community. I've hugely benefited from growing up in Newton and raising my own family in Newton and seeing what it has benefited for us. For 25 years, I've represented homeless families at Greater Boston Legal Services, and many of you on this call, I've collaborated with your agencies. Sarah Slaughterback, you remain a hero for our families. And in case there's anyone listening who has doubt about the need, I just wanted to share a teeny bit about what we've been seeing. In my 25 years of doing this, I have not seen the need as bad as it is right now. We have families sleeping on the floor of emergency rooms for weeks on end, to the point that it's compromising the hospital's ability to deliver emergency care. DHCD has tried, I know, to set up as many sites as possible, but some families have been placed with small children on cots in large rooms, no doors, having to leave the building to shower. There is no doubt in my mind that this is absolutely essential. And there's also no doubt in my mind that it can be life-changing if we can do this right. You know, neuroscience teaches us that when children are facing toxic stress and incredible difficulty in their first 5 years of life, whether you mitigate that stress or let it persist and get worse, will change the architecture of their brain and have lifelong health consequences. So to that end, I also wanted to share that our experience is that many families have children who aren't school age yet. And I want to make sure folks who are in this planning process know that access to free subsidized childcare subsidies are immediately available to every child in an EA program. And so that is there. The challenge is that Newton doesn't have many programs that accept subsidies and have openings and have transportation. So I just wanted to put that out there. If there's a way I can be helpful, I'm glad to moving forward.
Thank you, Sarah.
So Hattie, we have a couple
And
questions.
Barney,
Yep.
I'm just gonna say, Sarah, can you email Linda Walsh, head of our Health and Human Services, lwalsh@newtonma.gov, so we can be in dialogue with you? That'd be great. Thank you, Sarah.
Glad to.
The mayor is a matchmaker.
Barney, you want to do some Q&A questions?
I do. I'm gonna group a couple here, and this probably might be best answered by the folks at DHCD, talking about where the potential families would come from, whether there's a priority system in place. Then there was a question about what would be the earliest date a family might be able to move in, and whether a family of 5 is too large. This person is welcoming a refugee family. So a lot of questions in there. I don't know if DHCD has a response on that.
Great, thanks, Barney. Hi, my name is Adam Schaefer. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division of Housing Stabilization at DHCD. So in terms of when the site may open, we're tentatively looking at later this fall for the specific refugee family and question, I would love to follow up with you after this and talk through what the family, what you're expecting, so we can help them even avoid homelessness and move into housing of their own. In terms of who is eligible for the shelter system, families must be under 115% of the federal poverty line, must be Massachusetts residents, and must have no feasible alternative housing, meaning they don't have another place to stay. In terms of priorities, when we're making placements and transfers between shelter units, we prioritize families with ties to their home community. So later this summer, we'll be partnering with our friends at DHCD to identify kids enrolled in the Newton public schools already who are elsewhere in our shelter system and other shelters, as well as within a 20-mile radius of Newton, so that we can get them back to their home community, get them closer to their employment supports, back closer to employment, closer to their family, closer to their schools, as much as possible. I think, Barney, please let me know if there's anything in there that I missed, and I'm happy to add.
No, you anticipated one question that we got was whether or not families currently in emergency assisted housing that have a connection to Newton are given priority for this space if it becomes available. And I think the answer to that is yes.
Yes, most definitely. We always try to place families with a tie to their community right into that community.
Adam, people have already asked me about both legal status and any background checks. How do you talk about these things?
Sure, absolutely. As part of our eligibility determination, families must have established Massachusetts residency, and their presence in the United States must be acknowledged by federal immigration authorities, and they must currently not be under a deportation order. So they must be Massachusetts residents. While we certainly are seeing a number of new arrivals into the state, many of these folks are more our friends or our neighbors who are really struggling under this housing market to maintain their housing. And again, we're deeply grateful to the Newton community for welcoming these families in.
Great. Why don't we do Janet and David Brennan? Janet and or David, feel free to speak.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to unmute. It sounds like the people from the last discussion that would be in this Hotel Indigo would be people that have been living in Massachusetts. My first part of the question was about if bilingual and or separate education for children that don't speak English was going to need to be augmented at the public schools. But then the second part of my question is that building has been shut up for years. And I'm wondering if people are doing a mold assessment, because buildings that don't have ventilation and all of that going on very often develop mold issues. And for the safety of the people that might be there, I just want to ask if that is being considered. That's my two parts of my questions.
Okay. So there were two pieces to that. Who would like to take the educational piece?
So I will. First of all, thank you for the question. As is any of our students that come to our schools and have any type of language needs, there is a screening that takes place. There's proper support depending on their level of English language acquisition, but we are poised to be able to provide that and have begun to have those discussions to make sure we're able to support.
And I think the second part of the question.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mayor.
Casey, could you perhaps tell folks just how many different languages we support in the Newton Public Schools, and approximately how many of our students are involved in our ELL program? It's unbelievably impressive, the work that Casey and her team do. I just want to make sure everybody understands how much of it we already do.
Sure, I would be happy to. And I would say that it's not just my office, it's all of our offices together. But we have, I don't know the exact number, so forgive me, but certainly dozens of languages that we support across all of our schools. We have well-trained English language learner educators at all of our schools. We also internally from the school district have been meeting as a smaller team that does include our director of English language education. So she is well aware and has a team ready to support families from registration through when students are in the classrooms as well.
So the second part of the question, I think, had to do with the condition of the building. I know we have Damian Chaviano from Mark Development and John Lochik, our Commissioner of Inspectional Services, on the call. So Damian, do you want to address that? And then John, if you've got any comments as well.
Sure, I'm happy to give that a shot. Good evening, Damian Chaviano, Principal at Mark Development. To your question, as you point out, the building has been closed since shortly after COVID started. To that comment, we have done a significant amount of analysis as to what it is going to take to get the building open. Everyone from ISD to police and fire have been through, and we continue those discussions. And I will, to directly answer your question, yes, a full mold assessment is underway as well as part of that analysis. So that work is underway. It is still ongoing as we try to work through our efforts collectively here as a partnership to try to get this off the ground.
John, I don't know if you had any comments on that or whether that suffices. Oh, looks like John may be having some difficulty with his audio. So, but as Damian alluded to, the city has already done kind of a preliminary inspection, pointed some things out. All the work that would be done in the building in conjunction with a building permit would be inspected and approved by all of the relevant departments to make sure that it was safe and sound for folks to occupy the space. Hattie, who do we have next?
We have Josephine McNeil.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I just want to say, I think this is an opportunity for the city of Newton to shine. And we have many organizations and individuals, I believe, who will step up to volunteer and to be involved. My question is, I guess, directed at DHCD. My understanding is that the duration of this is 2 years. And so the question is, how is, or what is DHC doing to be able to provide the families with the financial assistance that they're going to need to move into permanent housing? We know what the situation is in this state, and there's, without a voucher, folks are not going to be able to find a place to live, certainly not in the eastern part of the state.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the kind words. We greatly appreciate it. It's absolutely correct. We need to build more throughout the state, and particularly in Eastern Massachusetts. In terms of the benefits that we have available to families in the shelter system, some are receiving MRVP vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, finding their way to the top of public housing waiting lists, as well as during COVID, the emergency housing vouchers or EHVs that were made available as part of the pandemic. We also have expanded the home-based program, which was once a $4,000 program to a $10,000 program, and now a $20,000 program spread over 24 months to help families move into housing of their own. And we're continuing to work with our partners to identify additional ways to help families move into housing of their own, though absolutely hear and echo that this is challenging work, and we're grateful to have great partners like Catholic Charities and their housing search team with us to do this work.
Thank you, Adam. I just want to add that, housing is not just a necessity, it's a valuable asset for communities. And we have to build more housing. That simply has to be the long-term plan. And we need housing of every single type. So, again, I am so grateful to be able to partner with Newton and with Catholic Charities. This is hard work, but this is meaningful work. And I do know that we really do want to continue to provide this safety net for our most vulnerable here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a right to shelter state, and we have a very low number of unsheltered homeless here in Massachusetts, but we have a lot of work to do. And I'm really encouraged by Newton and everyone on this call who is working to make sure that we continue to have this most vulnerable safety net. But again, we have to make sure that we are building more housing. It's essential.
May I, sorry, I'm not sure who I stepped on. Could also somebody talk to about how long a family might stay at 399 Grove, and that there might be some turnover and what that looks like?
Sure, I can speak to that. Our average length of stay, as former question asker noted, is long and growing longer. We're seeing folks stay months into a little over a year on average. That being said, we're hopeful with the home-based expansion that we discussed, we will be able to move folks into more permanent housing after all the, and recognizing this is a temporary shelter, we'll be working closely with Catholic Charities and our other shelter partners to expand into more permanent long-term shelter sites beyond the 399 site after the 2 years.
To Adam's point, when you're thinking about the issue of homelessness, to stabilize individuals and families, it's really the upfront and constant services that'll be important as you try to transition folks into more permanent housing. So I would just as a principle, I think people need to keep in mind that the point of moving someone to stabilize housing starts on day one, once they get into the shelter. So that's a very important point that we need to keep in mind, so that when it's time to transition, it's smooth and it's not disruptive.
Okay, we had a couple of questions relative to the plans for students that would be housed here if they went to Williams School. What kind of supports and assistance would be provided? So whoever would like to speak to that, whether it's Newton Public Schools or DHCD.
I'm happy to speak to that. Hi, everyone. I think first, it's important to note that our plan is to distribute students across a number of different Newton schools, depending on enrollment. It's going to be important for us to know more about the students who are joining us, first in terms of who is already affiliated with our schools, right? And maintaining those connections as much as possible. And while Williams may very well, given their proximity to the former Hotel Indigo site, may accept some students, they will not take all students, nor will Brown. We'll be looking at, and again, given the timeline on this, it's going to be important for us to monitor enrollment in our schools before solidifying the plan for which schools will be accepting students, but they will be distributed. And then the plan, as much as it is, as we accept students throughout the course of the year, we accept students through, intermittently throughout the course of the year and are constantly examining student needs and how to support them. In this particular case, we're fortunate to have the additional funding that's coming to support specifically students who are residing in this emergency shelter to help support any additional needs that may be necessary to support students as they transition into the Newton Public Schools.
I'll also just add that not only is Aisha our superintendent, assistant superintendent for all 15 of our elementary schools, she used to be the principal at the Williams School, so she knows that community well and loves it.
A special place in my heart for sure.
Great, thank you. Next is Liz Maribel. Go ahead, Liz.
Otherwise known as Liz Mirabile. They just happen to know
There
her
you go.
name well.
Liz? All right. I am going to move on to the next person, then we'll come back when you're ready. Tom? Tom, you can speak.
Are you saying Tom?
Oh, sorry. JG.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I didn't log in with my name by default. This is Jared Glennon. I live in Ward 4. I had a question about the funding regarding the students, the new students. The numbers I've seen published, I don't know how accurate they are, but it would suggest that Newton is not being made 100% whole on the educational costs of the new students. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Sure, I will speak to that. When we're talking about the supplemental budget is what I think that you're referring to, and getting that money quicker. If these students had entered the district prior to the October 1 numbers of this year, they would not be included at all in the count. So this supplemental budget actually adds them into the count. So this is money that as new students going into your school district, even if they had moved in, whether they were in the shelter or not, they would not be included in your educational Chapter 70 funding for this school year. So it's actually getting that money ahead of time. With regards to the amount of money that is being allotted, it is being allotted based on the state average of per pupil, which I am sure the city of Newton has a little bit higher threshold of their state average of their student per pupil enrollment. But again, this is money that if it was a new student into your district in September, they would have not been included in your numbers to begin with. So we do think that this is very helpful to school districts in supporting the shelters. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if the superintendent wants to add to that.
As far as the average, I think we average about 23,000, a little bit more per pupil expenditure. But as Anne Marie has told you, we every October 1st have a count of our students for some state support that Newton receives for our students. We are pleased that, as she said, in the supplemental budget, we will not have to wait that year, 18 months, and we will be reimbursed sooner. It is on a prorated average. We have 180 days of school. So we will have to keep count of every day a student is in attendance in our district, to receive that. But As we said, we feel certainly poised, supported to be able to welcome students. As Aisha mentioned, we will look at our numbers across the district to make sure that it makes sense where a student is placed based on their needs, proximity, and we have the support. Again, we're pleased about that $1,000. That's important when you talk about, as you said, Anne-Marie, technology, backpacks, supplies. Again, this is something that we do all year. There are students that come throughout the year into our district. We have resources to be able to support those students. That is an expectation we have throughout the year.
All right, I'm gonna call on, I did Liz again, but Liz, I don't think is available. All right, I'm gonna do Deborah. Oh, let Deborah put down her hand. I'm gonna do Liz Riley. No one wants to talk. Liz Riley? All right. Looks like JG has a follow-up question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I guess the core of the concern for me is the override didn't go through. The operational budget is already at a deficit. There are a lot of services to current students being struck or scheduled to be struck for next year. It would seem what I've read, and again, I don't know if it's true, just what I've read, that this will be an additional financial strain on the school system, whatever the timing may be. It costs X amount of dollars to support a student in Newton. We're only getting, some number less than X. So I'm wondering how that's being accounted for in the, the broader picture of an already strained operational budget for the schools.
Let me answer that. Yes, JG, you are correct. I mean, we are in the middle of a budget process. We have had to make some reductions. The one thing that we have continued to protect and are in the process of doing that is making sure, again, that we have reasonable class sizes, that we have, whether it's a student that comes in with some type of a special need, whether it's a student that comes in with needing language support. We have made sure that we have kept intact our social and emotional supports, our interventionists. So as far as dollars and cents go, we will certainly advocate for money for our entire district, close to 12,000 students. But we are, certainly able, when you look at these numbers, and again, I don't have the numbers, but I've been told, as we said, I think it was 59 families. They're looking at possibly one student. Many of the students will choose to go back to their schools of origin, which under the McKinney-Vento Act, the reason for that is so that students don't continually move when they develop relationships or are connected with a school. So in looking at those numbers, we will be welcoming. We will make sure that we do everything we can. Thank goodness, as I look at this screen, thank goodness I've been in Newton a short time, but I look at my community partners, Linda Walsh, Megan Kennedy. So many of you are there to support us if we need that additional support going forward. We will keep the community updated through the school committee as much as possible. But the one thing that we want to do is make sure these students feel welcome, included, and we will do whatever we can to meet their needs. I've also mentioned a strong relationship with Catholic Charities and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So again, if we feel a strain at any point, we will reach out. If there are additional funds, I do not see that being something that we will encounter with the numbers that we're talking about here and the time to prepare.
Go ahead, Barney.
Okay, so I know we have a number of people with hands up. So we had a couple of questions. I don't know who best to answer them, having to do with if there's a household. Let me see if I can find it here. Just generally the concern about a potential increase in crime related to people that might live in the shelter. So I don't know the best entity to answer that question.
Sure. I can take that, and Catholic Charities colleagues, feel free to jump in if I miss anything. One thing we do want to clarify is these are exclusively families experiencing homelessness. This is different than individuals experiencing homelessness who have many needs, and we're thankful to our partners on the phone as well, who also assist this population. But that is a very different population. With families, we see much lower rates of criminal records. We don't see we see hardly any violence in our shelters, and we see very low, much lower rates of serious mental illness or substance use disorder. So while we can't say there will certainly be no risk, we are taking extraordinary steps with security, very robust staffing, and the recognition that these are families with children who tend not to be involved in, I think, some of the concerns that were raised.
I think that's actually correct. And that's sort of the pattern we see. We currently operate 3 other family shelters, low rates of violence. And actually what Adam said, with this project, we will be even more robust with the amount of staffing and the amount of security that will be provided.
Yeah, Barney, I can hop in here as well. Any housing facility we have where multiple families are put into one place at one specific time, we have issues that will pop up, whether it's noise, whether it's issues with family walking through hallways. We're well prepared to service all those calls and deal with those on a one-on-one basis. And we figure after time, people get used to each other, and those calls will dwindle down as they normally have done in the past.
Thank you. Hattie, I see some hands up.
Yeah, I'll do Deborah.
Hi, I'm Devorah Rohr, and I am a resident of Lower Falls. I also have some children living in our household who were formerly homeless, and I am really, really excited to see this project move forward. I am curious if there has been any conversation connected to this or within the framework of moving families here. I know the hope is that families will reintegrate into their communities or communities where they have support, whether that's where they came from or new or not. That being said, there is a real serious problem here in Newton of affordable housing, like a really serious problem. And I am really disappointed the number of times that I've heard complaints about that it'll raise crime, that it'll bring issues with population density and parking and traffic and all of that. I think that the hotel site is a great place for this temporary shelter because it already is set up for higher traffic and parking and all of those issues. And I'm wondering if there's any conversation about what to do once families have moved here, but the fact that there is not really a position for them to integrate into this community in any way. I would love to hear about any plans to address that in the future.
Let me jump in for a sec and just say everything you say rings true and rings loudly. There's a significant shortage of affordable housing here in Newton. Barney Heath's team includes a whole group who thinks about housing, and Linda Walsh's team over in Health and Human Services, including Megan Kennedy, who's with us tonight. as a team that is also trying to link people to housing here in Newton or find other opportunities. And I know Barney's team and Linda's team will be in close touch with the folks at DHCD so that if there are opportunities for them first to come here temporarily, these families, but then settle in and have roots here, wouldn't that be ideal for these families to start school here and be able just to continue here over the years? So we're committed to working closely with DHCD and with Catholic Charities for those, unfortunately, very few opportunities where there are. If we can make it work, that would be wonderful for these families.
Yep, probably not now, but Devora, we love people with passion like yourself to help us with this effort in the city. And Hattie and I are always looking for people to serve on our boards and commissions. But we are working every day on this. The West Newton Armory is a good example of a project that when it gets fully funded and ready to go, might be a perfect place for folks that happen to be in this situation. We're trying every day to get housing built, in particular affordable housing, to expand the supply. So thank you for that.
And I would love to add that, we would love for folks to find long-term home in Newton. And we do have our state-funded MRVP voucher program, Home Base, which Adam talked about earlier about, it's a financial assistance benefit for folks that are eligible for EA, which can be used as a diversion and also as a way to exit out of shelter. We have the federal Section 8 and other similar benefits that can be used not only in Newton, but across the Commonwealth. So, and we are definitely interested in any and all opportunities to partner with Newton on housing production. Because at the end of the day, we have a shortfall in all types of housing, whether it's extremely low income, elderly, supportive housing, workforce housing, you name it. We need more housing.
I'm going to have Tom speak now. Gagan? Tom?
Here I am. Thank you very much for this meeting. All these people here who know so much. Well, comment first off. I think it's too bad that the Riverside project can't move forward, but given that, this is a great opportunity for Newton, and we should welcome these newcomers into our community. Now, having said that, there are concerns, and there's mention of criminals. Oh, can't have that. But I was thinking of this, if a criminal moves in next door to you, I mean, what can you do except call the police? But here we have Catholic Charities, which is sort of running the Indigo, the old Indigo, and is a place, if there's any problems, there won't be criminals, no criminals, but there may be problems coming up. And I wonder if there'll be contact information, so somebody that has an issue or maybe even wants to volunteer there can easily contact Catholic Charities to raise whatever concerns they have. That's all. Yes. That's my question.
The answer is absolutely yes. I know Beth also wanted to say something, but wherever we go, it is very helpful to the clients as well as to the community to work in tandem, and charities will like to be a great partner. You're right. You're absolutely right. That kind of synergy, that kind of connection makes it community safer, as well as it really advances the life chances and opportunities for the people that are in care. Beth?
I agree with what Larry's saying, and I think that, looking at our volunteers and looking at the opportunities that will be provided to the families, and as Stephen said, having security in the building, having, even our volunteers are quarried when they come into the building, and our staff, and, there'll be a lot of staff working, all 3 shifts of the day. So we will have our eyes on everything going on, and we'll work with the community on everything that we can during the time that we're there.
Great. I'm going to do Sean Roach.
Good evening, and thank you very much for letting me speak. 3 quick points. One is in reference to the whole project. What a creative, lovely solution using a resource like the Hotel Indigo. 2, in response to the folks who've expressed concerns about money. This is a moral issue. We have a moral obligation, and we got to figure out how to fund it. But we live in one of the wealthiest of wealthiest communities in the entire world. If we cannot find money for underhoused families, we have totally failed our moral obligation. And then Secretary Maddox, I didn't quite understand what you were saying about we need housing of all types. Do you maybe want to elaborate a little bit more on what you mean when a city like Newton, which is predominantly single family and extremely wealthy, what kind of housing do we need?
Great question. So what I'm referring to is the fact that as a Commonwealth, we have not kept up with housing production. And as a result, we have a shortfall of housing. And so we're going to need every single city in town to be able to get us out of this situation. We were in a housing crisis well before COVID. And so we need to be building more housing. We have a shortfall of approximately 200,000 units in Massachusetts. So as a result, I'm sorry. There's something going on up there. But what I was saying is that basically we are in a shortfall of housing, and the reality is that we need low-income housing, we need family housing, we need elderly housing, we need supportive housing. And so we need to work with cities and towns, with established, developers that know how to build this housing. And we need, I'm grateful for the MBTA communities law that we have, really encouraged that the majority of cities and towns, MBTA communities submitted their action plan, but it's going to take time to build that housing. And so that's what I'm referring to when I talked about that we have a shortfall of housing across the Commonwealth, which is why rents are high. Obviously we're dealing with the fact that interest rates have gone up, further compounding the problem. So you have, some first-time home buyers who no longer find it affordable to be able to buy their first home. So we have some challenges here, without a doubt, but I'm incredibly excited by the Healy-Driscoll administration that has made housing a priority, elevating the department to its own secretariat, which hopefully looks like all signs we're going to become a secretariat, which allows direct access to the governor to be able to advocate for the resources that are needed to meet the moment that we're currently in.
And I'll just also mention, Sean, I know you well and know how passionate you are about housing and zoning. For others, Newtonians, this is the perfect time to get involved. The city council, staffed by the planning department, is looking at zoning very intently, both around our village centers and in conjunction with the MBTA communities law. So email me. I'll tell you, the last night there was a very exciting meeting at the Zoning and Planning Committee that was looking at our second phase of village center zoning. Get involved. We'd love to hear your comments, get your feedback, and have you part of this journey. So just email me. I'll let you know how to get involved, or email Olivia James, ojames@newtonma.gov. She's really much better than I. She knows exactly where to point you.
I told you the mayor was a matchmaker. So.
All right, I'm going to promote Thomas Fryer.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Excellent. First of all, thank you for allowing me to jump onto this conference call. I think the only one on here that I know is Aisha, because my kids attended the Williams Elementary School. I've been a Ward 4 resident for about 50 years, and my entire family's from Auburndale, and Auburndale's got a very notorious reputation for being quiet and probably one of the safest villages in the city of Newton, which is an testament to the city of Newton employees and the police and fire and all that good stuff. And I also like to mention that I do love to donate to the Catholic charities often. My only question is around, and I apologize for kind of leaning more towards the safety of the neighborhoods. And I only ask because it's a very slight concern. Trust me, it's not a big concern. But do we know the average age of the children that will be living there? Are they infants, toddlers, or are they teenagers? And I only ask that question because teenagers, whether they're homeless or whether they're residents of Newton, can be teenagers. Yeah. And so my second question to that would be, is there going to be a curfew that the security and staff will, if they are teenagers, can they be heading out at midnight to do whatever? Because, kids will be kids. Case in point, I know that the Indigo was broken into recently by a bunch of Newton kids that aren't homeless. So my point is, I have a daughter, my wife, in the neighborhood, everybody walks their dogs at 11 o'clock at night. It's just a very little concern. That's all I'm asking. I appreciate the ask.
I can take the question about the students' ages, and maybe Amory, you can back me up for anything that I'm missing. I believe Thomas, that was your name. So our understanding is that first, not all of the families will be moving in at the same time. So we're not going to see an influx of new students coming all at once. That's our understanding. Also, about half of the students coming in, so we're talking between, I think, 20 and 40 students who will come in throughout the year, will be elementary age mostly. And then the other children coming in who would be living on Grove Street will actually not be school age, so they'll be younger students. Of course, we'll see middle and high school age students, but not very many. Amory, did I miss anything else?
No, that's excellent, Casey. We are seeing this play out just the way you described in the shelters that we are housing now. So mostly younger age students, kindergarten through grade 5, I would say, but there's certainly middle school and high school. I will tell you that we have heard some of wonderful stories about some of the high schoolers really getting very involved in the communities that they're in because they're so excited about the opportunities that are being presented to them. So I think your question is well-founded. I have teenagers, so I understand. But I think that for the most part, it's younger, and some families will have children who will not be school-aged at all and will be in early childhood centers as well. I don't know if DHCD wants to add to that.
I just asked Catholic Charities, there was a question, so are there curfews or how do you operate a shelter, and can a teenager or anybody come and go? Talk to a little bit about operations.
So go ahead, Stephen.
The majority of our family shelters will have curfews set up. Families will come in, they'll be reasonable. We won't have people, walking around the place at midnight or anything like that. I think some of our family shelters, based upon the neighborhood, we're looking at 9 or 10 o'clock. They need to be in maybe a little later on the weekends. And then we have people that will have passes, be able to go where they need to go, but will be expected back at the shelter. It's just a way of, maintaining, assistance for them to make sure that they're, getting what they need with regard to the programming so that they can actually move on to a the stable environment that we're working to get them toward.
Beth?
No, I think that Stephen just answered, the questions and at the same time to say that, there is the curfew, but there's also passes for, as he said, for leaving for the weekend, et cetera, but just the accountability of each and every family every day and having the staff on duty and having security there, to monitor what's going on throughout the day and the night.
All right, I'm gonna go to AR.
Hi there. My main question is around the school situation. Obviously, with the override recently failing, the teachers, the staffs within NPS are already feeling strained. A lot of services are already being removed from our current students. Staff positions are being cut, especially at the elementary, kindergarten level. Things like explaining our differences, programming is being cut, music stuff being cut for our elementary students. You're saying a lot of these kids are going to be elementary level, and our staff is already feeling strained without these cuts from the override not passing. So my question is, how is the state going to maybe fill the gap for that strain? Vice superintendent or interim superintendent recently spoke at a principal coffee at Williams saying that there's going to be about a $7,000 deficit between what the state is funding and what the current Newton student costs our city. So I'm just hoping someone can speak to that and where that money is going to come from and what supports are going to be given to our staff, given the extra work that they're going to accrue with these added students.
I'll take first crack at that, and then you can, I'll count on Dr. Smith to add on. Again, I just want to emphasize the support of Governor Healy and all the legislators in passing this supplemental budget, which I think is critical to support the schools and the students in these districts. It's not only the city of Newton, but other districts across the state are in the same circumstances because of the housing crisis. And I'm not exactly sure that this has ever been done before in terms of a supplemental budget for homeless, other than transportation, which is in the budget. So I'm very grateful for the legislation and the governor's leadership to put these funds forward this year. So school districts that are experiencing this now are being reimbursed, and the city of Newton will be reimbursed next year. And I do understand that there is a delta in the gap. And I think that as this progresses, that we will continue to look at this and decide how we can best support these school districts across the Commonwealth, because Newton is not alone in stepping up to the challenge and helping our students and our families through this difficult time in their lives. And Superintendent, if you'd like to add to that.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Yes, I certainly remember being out at the Williams School. Thank you to our parents who come out and have these discussions. We have talked very openly. We do have a budget that we're dealing with right now and an override that did not pass. But the one thing that we're trying to do, especially with our youngest students, we continually are looking at making sure that whether it be social and emotional supports, counselors, interventionists, looking at our class sizes, especially with our elementary school students, we continue to do this daily, that we are making sure whether it is the students that will come to the emergency homeless shelter, other students that come into our district from many places, that we feel we are, again, going to strategically make sure that they're placed where we can provide the best education possible, the services needed. And I think the thing that you brought up most importantly is our staff. I talk about it all the time. It has been a difficult 3 or 4 years. Our staff has been on the front line. I often talk about the pandemic not being over for any student and the supports that we need to to put in place and continue to be there as administrators. I have my whole team here today, and they will continue to be here next year. And, we are doing that on a very regular basis with our wonderful school leaders, our teachers, and making sure that we are trying not to impact that experience. Yes, there are some things we have had to reduce, but again, I feel very confident that we'll be able to meet the needs of our students coming in with the emergency shelter. We will again keep our community involved as we hopefully finish up the budget process in the next couple of weeks as to how we move forward.
If I could just add on just a note, I'm double-hatted as mayor and as a school committee member, and Kathy, Aisha, Casey, Toby, and I have spent a lot of quality time together, including last night and earlier today as the school committee was meeting. I do understand why parents and caregivers are so passionate about our schools and concerned about reductions that will be happening. It's clear as the budget discussions are continuing that elementary class sizes are going to be okay, and the supports will be there for our young ones. I'll also just put it in perspective. We're talking probably in the range of about 30 students ish, I'll say, in the grand scheme of 11,500 students. It's a very small number, and not only will these students be well cared for and looked after and known and welcomed, but all their other classmates who surround them, who are in that same grade with them and in the same classroom, will be as well. That's our commitment.
Thank you. I think we would like to conclude, if we can, in the next couple minutes. We got a couple more hands raised, right, Hattie?
We do. I'm going to call on Jeffrey next. Jeffrey?
Yes, thank you, all of you, for coming tonight to listen to us. I had a question in the Q&A which wasn't addressed. I want to say that, I don't think anyone in the neighborhood is opposed to helping people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the best project or the best place for something like this, or the most cost effective. People are not all wealthy in this neighborhood, despite what someone said. They're also struggling with high inflation, high taxes, high housing costs themselves. And this just adds to the worry and stress of all these people, of all the residents. Even though it may be a wonderful project, people are still struggling after COVID, and it may not be the best time for something like this or the best place. But my question in the Q&A was about the cost. What is the total cost in terms of the construction and the operations? And were any other cheaper alternatives, less expensive alternatives considered? Because my understanding of the hotel is that it was gutted, and it's going to take a lot of money to restore this to be able to be used. And could an existing building somewhere in the city be used instead that would be cheaper and more cost effective, and maybe a better way to utilize the money than to try to renovate this hotel at this point? So those are my concerns and my questions. I know many people in the neighborhood have the same concerns. So, I appreciate you all coming tonight, and maybe there's a better place for this or a better time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe, yeah, Adam, why don't you talk about perhaps the finances, and then let me talk about a bigger picture question.
Sure, absolutely. We have the state's internal fiscal team has looked at the costs, and we're still working out the final details with Catholic Charities and Mark Development, and don't have a final number to share yet. But we do believe, based on where we're at, that this is a cost-effective model compared to other potential sites that we've looked at. Unfortunately, the reality is there are not very many other empty buildings across the state. We're deeply grateful to the city of Newton for looking at a lot of other sites as well. And I think there are at least 5 or 6 that we looked at in Newton alone before landing on this one. The state has also been reviewing all of the state-owned properties across the Commonwealth to see what sites we could potentially use as well. And we have used some Salem State, for example, an underutilized dorm space there. We converted it into a shelter, and we absolutely hear and share the position that these are taxpayer dollars, and we need to be good stewards of those taxpayer dollars. And we do believe, based on the deep and profound need among families experiencing homelessness, that this is both the most cost-effective option we have right now, as well as a necessary option based on the humanitarian crisis we're facing. I'll hand it back over to Mayor Fuller.
And I do know what a really tough time it has been for almost every Newtonian. And I think we're all still in recovery mode and shaky, given health concerns, financial concerns, concerns about democracy, you name it, kind of the list goes on and on. I would still say, I was trying to find the quote while I was looking at it, if not now, when, if not here, where, even everybody as bruised as we are, I am so confident that we will be welcoming and supportive of these 59 families and who are in such a, if we think we're having a tough time, just think of being homeless with your children. And you know that they're in even a harder position. And I hope that we'll all be able to look into our reserves and find that generosity, even with all the difficulties we as individuals are facing. And I actually have a lot of confidence that as a group, we Newtonians will do just that.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end this. I do want to bring in Olivia's voice to talk about where people can find continuing information and updates on this, and tonight's presentation, where they can email questions that come to them later. Olivia?
Thank you, Barney. So we do have a page on our website that has information about this project as well as FAQs. And so if you were to go to newtonma.gov and navigate to the planning department, there's a page called Temporary Emergency Assistance Family Housing. And if you click on that, you'll be able to see a lot of information, also keep up with updates that we have, upcoming meetings. And then in terms of any questions that you might have or anything that wasn't answered in this session, please feel free to email me. I'm ojames@newtonma.gov, and I would be happy to direct you to people who might be able to assist you or answer questions myself.
And as we sign off, a huge thank you to the team on the screen, because we're on this journey together. I want to lift up Damian Chaviano and Robert Korf, who live here in Newton, who actually took the call from DHCD. They could have hung up. They didn't. They stayed in dialogue. Thank you for your generosity and in finding a way. And by the way, we're pretty sure it's going to happen. It's not even, the leases haven't been signed and there's still things moving on. We will keep everybody up to date as we move along. My guess is this group will come back with the community right around when people are scheduled to be moving in, so that you can ask lots more questions. But please take Olivia up on her offer. She'll be the gatherer of questions, and she knows how to reach everybody else on the screen. So, and I'll put out info in the updates and check the website. This is an amazing team with both great experience and great hearts. I'm honored to be working with you on this, and to our community members, we're here and we care, and we'll be welcoming and also bring out all the best of Newton. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. Go Celtics, go Bruins.
Here, here.
Everybody.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.